Hello, this is Yakov Fein with Farata Systems, and today I want to show you a couple of small apps. One of them uses ngrx library to maintain a state in Angular apps, and the other one doesn't. We'll compare and contrast these two approaches. But first I'll give you a super brief overview of the ngrx data flow. Imagine that you have a component with an input field, like over here on the right hand side. On the left hand side, actually, you see a field IBM with a value IBM. I click on the button buy 100. It's supposed to buy 100 shares of IBM stock. A component dispatches an action on the store. The store has a reducer. Reducer is a pure function that can handle an action. It can take the current state, clone it, and create a new state, and return it back. Whoever is interested will subscribe to this state change using the method select, and the UI will update the whatever user sees accordingly. Beside the reducer, ngrx offers effects, as opposed to reducers, which are pure functions. Effects are not pure functions. So in effect, you would program some business logic, you would implement Angular services. Angular services can go out, make HTTP request, get the data back, and then the effect class will dispatch another event. For example, the first event was buy, and the second event dispatched by effect will be by success or by failure. That effect will go back to the reducer. Again, the reducer updates the states, and subscriber to the state will get the data and update the UI. That's pretty much it. Now let's talk about the app. Let's look at the code of the apps. The first version is an ngrx version. It's a simple app which has one field when you can add products, and I also have inventory service which will either allow you to add this number of products or not. In my app logic, if the user tries to enter anything less than 20 items of the product, we return an observable of this quantity, and we allow to do this. If the user will enter more than 20 products, we throw an exception. Actually, we create an observable that has an error message: refused too many products. That's the business logic of my simple app. Now, let me run this app. Let me build it and run it first, and then I'll explain you how the code works. Right now, it's building the bundles. In 10 seconds, it'll be ready, and we'll look at this beautiful UI. Almost there. We are ready. Now, let me go to the screen. Now you see the app. Actually, let me open up the console. So I am entering 3 products and hit the button Add Products. It's fine. It allows me to add 3 products. On the right, using the console log statement, I show you that the action add product was dispatched with a payload 3 products I wanted to add, right? And type of the action is add. Then another action went under the hood, and it was add product success, because we successfully added the product with a payload of 3. Type of the action was product added, and we see that. Let me add another product, another number of products, for example 7. Add product. Another couple of actions were fired under the hood, and the total quantity was updated. So currently the state object has 10 products in total. Now let me create an error situation. Let me try to add 30 products. I hit enter. See, it didn't let me to enter more than 20 products, so the add product failure action was dispatched by the effect, and the UI received an error which is refused too many products. That's the app. Now let's see how it is implemented with ngrx. In ngrx apps, first you need to add a couple of things in the module. In particular, you need to add the store, and in our case we use effects, so we add effects. And accordingly they should be imported, of course, from the proper places. I also have inventory service, which I already showed you, but I also have effects, reducer, and so on. So let's look at all these elements. I created a folder store, and everything related to the store is sitting there. Let's see, action. Action defines all actions that may be dispatched in my app. The first action would be add product, right? Add product is the action that will be dispatched when the user clicks on the button buy, in my case, or actually add product in my case. The other action is add product success. This action will be dispatched by the effect if the service allows us to add the product. And the third possible action would be add product failure. 3 actions total. An action can have not only a type but also a payload. In my example, how many products I want to add. So payload would be the object with a property quantity equal of 3 or 7 or whatever else I add. The state will also have the property error, or error message actually. If the service doesn't let me add this many products, I will set the property error message to whatever message I received. Where am I going to do this? State management. In the reducer. That's the only place. And let's take a look at the reducer. In the reducer, I define the type for my state, which has 2 properties, product quantity and error, if any. Initial state of my app would be product quantity 0, and error is empty string, no errors yet. And the name of my reducer is product reducer. Reducer always receives 2 arguments. The first one is the current state, or initial state by default, and an action to handle. Inside the reducer, what you do is you write a switch statement to test the type of the action received and react accordingly. Let's see. Add product success. What if we receive the add product success action? What do we want to do? We want to clone the state object and update certain property in the cloned version of the state. In ngrx, we never update the original state, we just create a new copy of it. So cloning I do using the ECMAScript 6 operator called REST. It's supported in TypeScript as well. This basically means take the existing state, create a clone of it, and update selected properties. In this case, I want to update product quantity, where I calculate total product quantity, and I want to update an error or reset an error to empty string. Why? Because it's an add product success event. I received the product information. In the next case, in case of failure, I also want to clone the state object, but in this case I only update the error property on the state object. And finally, by default, I return the current state. Why I want to do this? What if my reducer will receive an action that it doesn't know what to do about? In that case, it'll just return the existing state. That's the reducer. Next, let's take a look at the effects class. Effects class is the one that can go out and get the data, update the data, and communicate with the rest of the world. So what our effects class, inventory effects, receives? First of all, it receives the actions. And second, it receives, in this case I also want to inject the service, my service which has business logic to update or not update the quantity of the product. Inside the fx class, you can declare one or more properties annotated with a decorator effect. This is the effect that can handle the action and can dispatch another action. In this case, we say, by the way, take a look. I use $sign at the end of the variables, which is a naming convention to say that this variable is an observable. So what we say here, we say if the action is of type add products, we use a bunch of operators. We use pipeable operators, right? That's why we use the method pipe. And in there, what do? I use the Rxjs Map Operator. So what do I say? I say take the action and give me the payload from this action. That's the map. Next, I use the tab operator just for debugging purposes. It doesn't change the observable. It just prints something on the console, just for me to see that I received the quantity. Then I do switch map. Why do I do switch map? Because I want to invoke another method that returns an observable. In this case, this is the inventory service add products. Let me go back. See, it returns an observable. So I am switching from the outer observable to the inner one. Switch map is typically used when we assume that the outer observable may change and we want to switch from handling one outer observable to the other. Now, what this method add products can return me? It can return me a success or an error, right? Add products. So again, I attach a couple of operators to the return to the inner observable, right? What do I want to do? I attach map. I want to take the quantity that I received from the service, inventory service, if the quantity was updated, and I want to dispatch a new event, add product success, and provide the payload quantity that I received. In case of an error, if inventory service add products returns me an observable as an error, what do? I catch this error and I use the off operator to take the new action and turn it into an observable with the payload, which is error message. What happened? Why I didn't let to add the product? So that's an effect. Obviously, I could have made the HTTP request to some other servers and so on, but for simplicity, I keep it as is. Finally, the selector, the UI, needs to receive the updated state, right? So selectors allow you to get either the entire state object with all its properties or only certain slice of it, certain properties of a state object. A state object can be a large object with nested properties and objects and so on. So in ngrx there are so-called selectors. First, you need to get a hold of the base state object, of the root state object, so sort of this feature module. That's why you call create feature selector. And then you can specify more selectors. Each of those will be extracting only a particular slice of state that you're interested in. For example, get quantity is a selector to retrieve only the state.product quantity property. Get error message is a selector to retrieve the error message from the state object. So these are the selectors. Finally, we'll go to the component and we'll see how we can update the UI. The UI is a form, right? In this case, I use template-driven forms, and the user enters quantity in the input field and hits the button submit. Under the form, I want to show the total quantity of the product as it is now, or an error message if I get an error. So I want to use my selectors. Let's see, inside the component I declare a property total quantity $, and I invoke the method select on the store, passing certain selectors, in this case get quantity. The second observable would be error message. If an error message occurs, I want to be immediately notified that the error happened, so I use another second selector, and that is called get error message. Selector function is basically a callback. How do I show them? How do I show these errors or total quantity? In lines 15 and 16, I use async pipe in line 15 to show the total quantity, and in line 16 I use async pipe to show the error message, if any. Finally, our component can dispatch an action. Remember, when you click on the button add products, we want to dispatch an action. Which action we dispatch? We dispatch an action add product, right? And we parse the quantity entered on the UI, and this will be our payload. Once again, add product is an action that can be dispatched by this component, UI component, and effects class can dispatch two other actions, one of them being add product success, and the other one is add product failure. That's pretty much it. So once again, I already showed you this code, and now you can understand it a little bit better. Anyway, this app works. The next question is, do we want to use ngrx in this code? I can tell you up front, we don't. I can implement the same functionality a lot easier, and I'll show it to you in the next version of the same app. But for now, just remember that this app, I did like a rough calculation. It consists of roughly 160 lines of code, manually written code. Now I will kill this app, and I will switch to another one where I will be using regular Angular service, which will include inside behavior subject from Rxjs. That guy will maintain our state. So this is the code, I call it inventory node ngrx, and let's take a look at this code. I have an inventory service, very similar to what I had in the previous app, but in this case I also use behavior subject to hold the state and to push the changes in the state, if any, to the subscribers. I create a new behavior subject passing initial state being product quantity 0 and error is an empty string. Quick note, a behavior subject is like a regular subject in Rxjs, meaning it's both observable and observer, but it has one extra feature. It remembers the last value that was emitted by this subject, and any new subscriber or existing subscriber will receive the last value first. In this case, our last value, so to speak, would be this initial state with product quantity 0 and empty string as an error message. In there, I have an add product method, similarly to the version of with ngrx. What do I do in here? I'm saying I want to declare local variables inside the method add product, and I want to grab the existing value from the subject. Again, initially it's a product quantity 0 and empty string as an error message. Then the same thing, I check if the quantity is less than 20. I want to clone the existing state with updates of the product quantity to calculate the total and resetting the error message to empty string. If they will enter more than 20 the products, then I will again clone the state and set the error message to refused, too many products. Finally, I do emission of the state object to whom? I don't know. Whoever is subscribing to this observable, to my state subject. Last thing what I do, I do a casting of my state subject to an observable. Since the subject is both observable and observer, I want to make sure that subscribers for my subject will not be able to push the data back to this subject, to emit the data back. I just want to give them one portion observable, so they can only use the subscription. So who is the subscriber? By the way, the state is just an interface with two properties. Who is a subscriber? My app component, of course. The same form, submit, button, add products. What are we doing there? When the submit is clicked on, we take the quantity and we invoke the add product function on the service. The service is injected into our component. As simple as that. And what else do? We get a hold of the state observable by invoking get state on that inventory service. Once again, it's just an observable. Finally, I want to display on the UI the same way. I want to display the total quantity and I want to display an error, if any. So what do I do in there? I have an observable that listens to the state changes. I use async pipe, and actually I use async pipe with a special syntax called async as. I just give a variable name, a name to this async pipe to avoid multiple subscription to the same observable. Why would I have multiple subscriptions? I could have written async for total quantity and async for the state object. Instead of that, I just have this new variable referring to the observable, and I'm saying just give me product quantity from the state object, or in this case I'm saying give me the state object from this object, from the subject. That pretty much it. The app is done. It's much smaller than the one within ngrx, but it'll work the same way. Let me build it. ngsurf. And you will see that it'll behave exactly the same way. Almost there. Done. Let me go to the UI, refresh the screen. This one doesn't have ngrx, and I don't think I have any output from the console. But still, let me add 3 products. I added 3 products. Let me add 30 products. It's wrong, so I got an error. Let me go back and add 4 products, and I got correct state and correct total quantity. So the app works exactly the same. In terms of size, the size of this app without ngrx is only 80 lines of code, while the one with ngrx was 160, twice as much. If you will do ng build with the -prod option to make a production build, the size of the bundle in this app would be 268 kilobytes versus 315 kilobytes with ngrx. So to me it's obvious that there is no need to use ngrx in simple apps like this one. The code becomes much more difficult to read and understand with ngrx. The size of the app is bigger, and I don't see a need for using ngrx in smaller apps. My opinion is that you should be using a library, a JavaScript library or any other library, if it allows you to write less code. with ngrx, at least with its current version. This is not the case, and you need to write more code, not less. So that's pretty much it for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more blogs or technical content, visit my blog at yakovfein.com. Thank you.